Well, welcome back, everybody, to another installment of the Lady Leader series. So grateful to everybody who I know kind of catches up on these and for the feedback. And it's been really helpful to hear what's resonating and things like that with everybody. So thank you for that, first and foremost. Today, I have a topic that I was really actually excited to cover, despite the fact that it was about dental insurance, which makes people think snooze fest, but it's become a really hot topic, I would say, within the last year for doctors' offices. And part of what we're going to discuss is when to drop, insurances, when it makes sense to drop them, when it makes sense maybe to negotiate. And if we are going to drop them, how do we do it, planned for both the patients, the team, for the financials of the practice to actually make sense. But one of the things that recently kind of came into my inbox was knowing what's going to be happening in the economy. Is this a good idea to be dropping insurances, especially if I have an associate? So we're going to kind of launch into that. But what I'd love to do first is just get an intro. First, let's start with Allison. Go ahead and tell everybody a little bit more about you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So I still consider myself newer to dental. I have worked for Dr. Casmel for just about 5 years now, and that is when I jumped into the dental industry. Love numbers, love insurance, details, all of the things. So this was kind of just really natural. For me, the jump was really about finding an incredible team of women to work with. For those of you who don't know, I came from a very long time in the ski industry, very male predominant. And I found this incredible office of women, including Dr. here, who's with us, and the rest is history. So,
yeah, awesome. Amy?
Well, I've been in dentistry for 20 plus years. That's giving away my age, but that's all I know. I was in the military. I started out as a dental assistant, moved on up to different positions, and then started my own company a couple years ago, and then just joined forces with PPO Profits doing insurance billing. And that's pretty much what my whole story is. That's all I know is dental since I was a very young little girl, and love it. I love every aspect of dentistry. Dentistry is 100% my passion in life. So love what I do.
Yeah, I know. And I love that we have two women on here who love what they do when it comes to dental insurance, because you guys see the huge impact it has.
Definitely.
Well, and Ashley, as always, thank you for being on with us, because you always add such truly valuable insight to really everything that we seem to talk about. So thank you for being on as well. I appreciate it.
Of course, anytime.
Yes. So, offices are wanting to drop insurances right now for lots of reasons. The topic has become hot because, one, team members are potentially, especially hygienists, are wanting potentially more per hour, and doctors are finding the squeeze really difficult with some of the low, PPO rates that they're getting. I've heard as low as, I'm sure, Amy, you could probably tell me, but I've heard as low as, I think, in the 40s for pro fees, and they're paying their hygienists in, the upper 50s, and they're like, this is just not making sense. And then really, I know for us, and this was, probably 2 years ago that we started doing the process, but we just found that the amount of team support hours that were being needed to process the number of claims, the follow-up, like just the man hours, the people necessary to kind of keep that beast alive with that many PPOs was just getting really tough for us. And almost to the point where that ceiling of complexity was just getting hit and didn't make sense for us to keep hiring more people to work on insurance. So any other reasons, though, maybe, Amy, that you heard that people are wanting to drop in addition?
I mean, I get this question a lot, obviously doing with coaching for DSI and just overall. I mean, I have over 44 offices, and only 3 of them are fee for service. So, obviously I see the demand of PPO office based, but what makes them want to go out of network? And really it's the, same reasons. They don't like insurance. They don't want to deal with insurance anymore. But in reality, I try to explain to them that you will always have a relationship with insurance. You will never not have the relationship unless you are a true fee for service practice where you are collecting 100% in full, and then the check just goes to the patient and you have literally no relationship. Then I understand that is a true fee for service practice. But overall, even when offices think they're fee for service, you know, they're contracted even with Delta, they are not fee for service practice. You have to understand the lingo, and a lot of them just really, honestly, I typically hear it just because they don't like to hear deal with insurances, and then also like just the not knowing the knowledge of what they need to do, so they just kind of take that off of their plate because they think, I don't even know if I can find someone who's qualified to work, you know, with insurance overall, so let me just not deal with it. So a lot of times you just have to really make sure that if you decide those things, will your demographics support that? Will your office, wherever it is, are they going to support this vision that you have? Because maybe it will work in certain, you know, areas and communities, but not overall. So you just have to make sure that you are moving in the right directions if that's the vision you want.
Yeah, for sure. Allison, any other reasons? Because, you know, you get to talk to some offices too. Have you found that there's other reasons than what kind of we listed, Amy listed too, that you hear from offices who are wanting to just figure out a better way?
Yeah, I mean, everything Amy said is correct. And, you know, I do think one of the biggest things that, you know, we'll talk about today is, you know, the owner, the team at that office really deciding kind of the vision for your office and just making sure that, you know, the direction you're going towards is truly what you want, you know, because what works for one office may not work for another. But, you know, in our situation, I mean, hands down, and this is post-COVID, you know, so many of these issues did just get worse. They were just exaggerated. You know, I will just come out and, you know, Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, the hold times to even get through to a rep, you know, for us, that was a company where, you know, and we had so many different factors that we looked at, the ease of getting the information online. Can you even get through to a rep? I mean, we had companies post-COVID that were not even taking phone calls from dentists, from offices. So, you know, it was kind of the ease of working with some of these companies, the time commitment, which a lot of offices just do not have. Some companies, it's going to be so easy to pull almost all of the information online, to get really good breakdowns and info from, you know, an online portal versus, again, hours of hold time. And maybe you don't even get through to a rep. So, you know, the reimbursement, and then also, which we will touch on, but for us, you know, we were contracted with the Higher Carrington. So, you know, I think we kind of went into it as a win-win, where, as Amy said, we weren't, you know, terminating all contracts. We remained an insurance-friendly office, but it really did work for our benefit. And most of our patients, almost all of them, can continue to come to our office. So I think there are so many different factors to look at and to really do that research beforehand before you make those decisions. But, you know, everything else is just as you ladies said.
Yep. Yeah. So people are definitely looking into this more. I do want to highlight, you know, much like Amy said, you know, what we're discussing is not necessarily truly fee for service. People sometimes confuse, and I know it's kind of confusing, fee for service and out of network are different. So that's a really important distinguish to make that I want to make sure we didn't gloss over, is out of network means you're still going to be, you know, insurance friendly. You're going to still be working with insurances. The only way to ever get around that is to truly become completely fee for service check mailed to the patient. I just want to make sure that everybody caught that just in case. And with that, you know, what I would say is I'd like to dive into, you know, offices often ask me, you know, how do I know when it's even time? And I'll tell you and preface this, and I think, Ashley, you could totally resonate with this one, is I usually hear this question from offices that were startups, that they took somebody over and they have had to grind it out to grow that patient base. And so they're kind of living in that place of like, it's a little bit scary to think about starting to cut insurances because this has been all I've ever known. And they live in that sense of like, gosh, I'm nervous that if I cut them, everything that I've just worked so hard for is going to crumble. I'm sure you've heard that too. It's a lot of times those offices that have had to work that hard. Ashley, have you noticed that?
Yeah, and to that point, I loved what Allison said. You have to, just because that's what you took over, like you have to have a vision and a plan for what you want your office to look like. And you have to, think about that and then start to work backwards from there. How do we get there? So, just because that is what you took over and what, how it was, doesn't mean that's how it always has to be, right? So that's understanding the vision and your goal and working backwards is going to be key, I think.
Yeah, and there's not one way to have a successful office. You can have so many different ways that your office can be successful, and it doesn't necessarily match the person next to you, and just different levels of success. A lot of people don't even find success in money. They just feel like it's their time. So you have to find out their expectations of what they're wanting to achieve and then kind of base the goals on that.
Yep. Because I've actually had offices that they run 3 columns, they're super PPO heavy. They're actually incredibly successful because they're efficient. They know how to run the columns and they love it. I have an office right now that I'm thinking of. If she's listening, she knows who she is, that like, that's just how she runs and she loves it. Don't take that away from her. She literally would be like, I don't know what I'd do if I didn't do it like this. So you're right. Like there's definitely different models and really think through what's going to make the best sense for you. But, on that note, if you've developed the vision, the first place I tell people is a lot of times it feels scary because we just don't have anything objective to look at. So for me, as everybody knows, if there's numbers involved or any reports I can pull to be able to look and decipher, that is where I'm going to start. And I want to figure out really what's my patient mix made up of currently. And, looking out 18 months at least and just see what are patients doing right now? Because by the way, what they did 18 months ago may not be what they're doing now. So taking a little bit of a broad spectrum of who's all been coming into my office. Is it cash? Is it actually as high of Delta Dental Premier as I thought? Because what I've noticed is in the last 18 months, the demographics of lots of areas have changed. My area being one of them. So I think it's important to recognize what was your payer mix before may not actually be what your payer mix is currently or where the projections are looking. Hence, Amy making the comment of know your demographics, know who the employers are, know what plans are, planning on bringing on, because that might change as well. So when we're looking at dropping insurances, pulling the reports, and Amy, I'll let you take over here because I know how we like to do it, but pulling reports can be really helpful to decipher not only the payer mix, but the percentage on each plan and actually the quality of the patients that are underneath each of these plans can be really helpful. How do you start looking at what, where your insurance mix is coming from, Amy?
Exactly. I mean, I strictly work with Open Dental. So obviously, I'm very partial to them. And queries, like you want to find out, a lot of times front office or your management will say, we see a lot of Cigna, but their definition of seeing a lot of Cigna might be different than reality of what Cigna is being seen. Because maybe you just had a heavy week of Cigna. You're just like, oh my gosh, our production's so low because, and then you're stating, we see a lot of Delta. So really running that information as far as reports and seeing what your active patients are in your established practice, and also making sure that you have clean reports on active patients. I see a lot of offices that will, let's say they do ortho and they create 2 accounts in their system, one in high uppercase and one in low, and they're saying, oh, well, we have 5,000 active, patients, but really some of them are duplicate accounts. So really getting a true number of your patients that are active in your office, running queries on what they're going to be doing or what they have, and then you'll be able to see percentages on where you want to look, because then you can determine what your fee schedules are based on those. So you can say, okay, well, maybe 40% of my patient base is Delta because I live near an Amazon, and Amazon is a heavy bringer into. So now you can determine, is it going to be successful if you do drop, because you are going to be losing, potential patients with Delta. Or if you're not in that situation and you're like, wow, I'm really concentrating so much on hating Delta, but I only see 10% of it. So you can then say, well, is it worth, to deal with Delta if I'm only 10%? Maybe I could just drop them. So running those reports, I think, are the number one thing that you want to establish in your practice first.
Yep, absolutely. Allison, obviously you've done it and I'm sure you agree, but anything to add to that?
these are things that we have kind of touched on, and I'm probably just going to try to go a little deeper. But, for us, we ran the reports looking at, new patients, existing patients. And I agree that the real numbers oftentimes were very different than what you thought they would be. I feel like we have so many patients on these plans. So running the reports is so important. We kind of, based on a handful of different factors, even from the pain in the butt of working with these companies, the fee schedules, high to low, how many patients, we did kind of prioritize and kind of make our list of who we would want to maybe not work with. But I would say again, we learned through this process so much, but being proactive, we then with those companies, would run reports to find like our top 10 group plans, for example, calling on those plans, getting the out-of-network benefits, because what we found was almost all plans, at least in our offices, had out-of-network benefits with very, very, very little change to the benefits, besides the fee schedule. Almost all were going to UCR. So again, it wasn't even this maybe terminating a contract and losing all of these patients, because if you do that work on the front side, what we found is all of those patients could stay. The fees would be a little different. So if there was a co-insurance, but we were actually shocked with that almost all of the plans had really good out-of-network benefits. So you just kind of start that mind shift too, where you're just looking at it differently. And, we really had to educate our patients on that as well. When you're in network with all the plans and then you change how you're working with them, patients just don't even know what out-of-network benefits are. Doctor, you kind of mentioned that. So really what we had to do was just educate our patients that your plan has in-network and out-of-network. You can still come to our office. So we really didn't lose many patients. How we work with their plan is just different. That was something we worked on a lot too, was the verbiage, of course. So right,
which we'll also kind of dive into, because I think that's pivotal when doing this.
yes.
But I think the point being too is if you're just starting to think about, should I be reducing some of my PPO participation? It's really pulling the reports, pulling the queries, finding out what the mix is, finding out how many true active patients, and then also what the mix of PPOs, cash, different plans are. Are they self-pay? Are they actually a group? And what does that group belong to? How difficult are they to work with? What's the quality of patient? I tell doctors all the time that once that list was pulled, Allison and her team were able to literally go through and be like, what? There's only 50 people on this plan. I would swear there was more. And what's crazy is those 50 never come in. We never see them, like quality wise of patient. That's a pretty easy one potentially. So once you have those numbers and reports, it can help you make better decisions. Some of the quick kind of maybe red flags that offices look for when they're getting to this point. And I don't want to, gloss over it too quick, but a lot of times, yes, you can't get patients in, but especially you can't get new patients in if that's something you're finding. Look at your exams per doctor, whether you're a single doctor, multiple doctors, if you're finding that, your exam count, which, Jake obviously, talks to us a ton about 150 to 175 total exams. If you're getting over that number, you get to decide, do you want to do associates or do you want to potentially, look at reducing participation with insurance? Sometimes it is that frantic pace. Frantic pace, though, I always warn doctors, is a sign. It doesn't necessarily mean it's indicative of either, because sometimes we're frantic just due to inefficiencies of scheduling, inefficiencies of procedures, things like that. But, sometimes it can be just the pace you're going at. Once again, when you pull the reports, look at the mix. If the mix just isn't necessarily what you're hoping for in that vision of where your office is going, that's part of it. And then, Amy really touched on it. Can your demographics support reducing some of those insurances? So those are some of the red flags that I know doctors start to look at, and they start to be like, gosh, I can't maintain this pace. I'm doing 250 exams per month. Do I reduce insurance? Do I add an associate? those all come into play when you're looking at some of these reports and you're thinking about what to do.
And then also, even when was the last time they actually raised their fees, their own fees, really matters too. Because if they're saying, gosh, these insurances never pay, but then they haven't raised their fees in a certain amount of time, what's going to happen? How are you expecting these insurances to pay anything more when you're already comparable to what they're doing? So you have to kind of, your office needs to stay in the market of knowing what that your zip codes will support. So then you can get those higher fees in your area as well.
Where do you suggest doctors going to look for that, Amy?
So I recommend always using your, if you work with, Henry Schein, exactly, Benco, any of your big companies, ask for your rep. Your actual rep will provide those things for you. And I always say stay around that 80 percentile, somewhere around there. I have offices that are like, let's go 100, we have to be realistic, but of course we all want to be high, but we have to also, take in consideration that when we are moving those patients for full UCR, that you are operating even maybe some membership plans within your practice to kind of offset some of that. So you are getting close to where you want, but then really putting yourself into a good place. So when you do negotiate fees, you're at a reasonable UCR. So, just like Carrington taking, some fee schedules taking like 20% off of, your UCR, you want to make sure that you're in line to where you're looking at.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Ashley, do you have anything you feel like when you're listening, anything that you'd want to add to any of this?
I mean, I think, they're doing a really great job of covering it. I love, obviously, like you mentioned, it's about data, it's not like the I feel like, that's a really, really big thing to consider, because a lot of times how we feel is not always what's happening. So I think that's really important. And then I love that too, Amy, of, you don't have to go all the way to 100. And like Allison said, you can still work with these patients. They do have really great benefits out of network. And, it's about the verbiage, which I'm excited to hear more about as well, because that verbiage is going to have to shift. I'm always wanting to improve my word ninja skills. So that's important for sure.
And it's going to be huge in the success of it, I think, for sure. But, I do want to say, let's say that a doctor's like, okay, I don't think I'm quite ready to really start cutting. We're going to talk about, a little bit more about what you were saying, Allison, about calling all insurances to see what the out-of-network benefits going under Carrington. We're going to talk about that. But Amy, I want to dive in a little bit to, like I said, what I'm hearing is some of the doctors who they'll pull the reports, they'll see all that. They have their associates, they're still kind of anxious about it. Is there a way that you would suggest they could either negotiate higher rates, a company, companies that you tend to support for, if they're really just looking to maybe stay in network, but negotiate higher rates, anybody you would recommend?
So when you try, okay, I'm just going to explain this is like, what's the difference of, I hear this a lot because obviously I do a lot of seminars and and I learn as far as even for startups, and it's like, why do I have to pay a company to do something that maybe I can do? But I want to help explain what the differences are. So when you try to negotiate directly with the insurance companies that you already are a provider of, you will need to typically deal with like provider relationships, department provider retention department, that they literally have a lower budget than the provider departments that we could potentially work with, I could say. And this is why it's so hard for existing providers to try to negotiate themselves and try to increase themselves, because usually they'll see a return in about 3 to 5% of what they can do. And that's because they're working directly with low budgeted availability in their insurance. And so they're only able to provide about a 3 to 5%. So this is the purpose of umbrella companies, because you will see an exponentially higher negotiation happen that you cannot see when you're trying to negotiate directly. As your fees are higher, you do lose access to some lower paying insurance plans. And I always like to use Cigna as an option, or as an example, Cigna DPPO Advantage. It's a bigger network of patients through this DPPO, and DPPO Advantage is a lower paying plan. But some of the DPPO Advantages plans have like a wraparound policy that will allow the patients to see a DPPO provider. So you can basically explain to the office that you see 2 types of people when seeing Cigna patients. So it's like at the end of the day, you change your mindset about your business being proportionally profitable based on the number of patients you see. This is not the point. This is one of the reasons offices are always stated that they hate insurances. It's really, you want to base it on how much money you make per person that's sitting in your chair. That's really what it comes down to. So if you are trying to see a Cigna patient, it is better to see a Cigna patient than it is a Delta patient due to the negotiated rates each fee schedule is associated with. So that's how you should really look at a practice, is making sure that are you having the quality of patient that you want in your practice based on their insurance. You can tell me all day, I see, 150 new patients. Is it Medicaid? Like, I'm not impressed, right? I want to be impressed with quality patients that you're coming on board. Are you attracting the correct fee schedule, or the insurances that have the correct fee schedules that you want? Those are the patients you want to be attracted to. So there's basically the difference of saying, what do I do? Pay a company to really understand, because, and I love this phrase of, when I was talking with the main person who runs PPO Profits, and she made a really great point. And she said, let me find her actual quote. I loved it. She said, working with a company, is like 1% negotiating and 99% understanding how the insurance companies work to do their strategic moves. So negotiating is just one part of everything. 99% is really understanding the bigger picture of how to make that happen. So when offices or people are wanting to start into this, venture of trying to negotiate, you have to understand that there's these big players in place, and they don't want to give you fees if you're trying to go directly with them. You have to learn the game of understanding umbrellas, because that's the purpose of what we're trying to do. We're trying to achieve the highest fee, which is closer to a UCR, which now means why not be in network? When you're dealing with it, why not be, contracted with them? Because you are now achieving what you want. You want the higher fees. You want to be on their their patient, form stating that you are contracted with them. It's great saying you are out of network for certains, and they do pay a lot, but in reality, patients want to hear that. And they don't, some of them, don't get me wrong, they don't understand what contracted means, and they don't, but it's a great thing to be able to say, yes, we contract with your insurance. We, be more than happy to see you, or however the verbiage is, right? Because they're like, oh, okay, they understand my insurance, they know, and they're getting a savings. Every patient wants to get a savings, but why not get that savings closer to your UCR?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you obviously recommend highly, utilizing companies to be able to negotiate the rates.
I have always seen that the hardest time that offices struggle with low fees is because their best office manager tried to do it for them, and they maybe succeeded in certain parts of it, and maybe they were able to access a great fee schedule, but they didn't understand the full capacity of what you could get, because all of the rules were not played.
Sure.
I could say.
Sure. Are there any, and this is for a whole nother webinar on coding, but if somebody's like, I'm not ready, can I just maximize some of the insurances? What are some of the really quick things that we see that maybe just don't get coded out when we're working with some of these bigger companies? Is there anything you ladies have found consistently that would be helpful to doctors right now? Hygiene or doctor's column?
Yeah, I'm all about coding, so I love coding. 0350 is the diagnostic scan. Only about 5 out of 10 insurances actually pay for it, but hey, I usually see UCR about $91, reimbursement about $72, and there's a lot of insurances that will pay for it. I actually have a list of them. I could pull that up.
And that might even be a resource. I don't know if you'd mind, Amy, we could attach to the if you wouldn't mind, you could literally say, like, here's the insurances that cover that diagnostic code, because that's a great one.
Yeah, and that's and I love it. As long as you take intraoral camera photos. I have to say that, please don't just submit it to submit it, but take intraoral camera photos and take at least 6 photos. And you should be able to get coverage for it. And it's not per tooth, it's per mouth. So you'll submit that code one time, and just really knowing your codes. I have a great new patient form that I like, is like, if you are a new patient and you have been diagnosed with perio, this is the codes that you should be using, or in order of like what an actual debridement is, when that 4346 code should be used. I feel like there's so much misuse with codes, but 4346 is such a great code to use if you use it properly, which is that gingivitis, kind of in between the prophy to the perio. So you basically do have to submit perio charting and photos, or not photos, but x-rays, but they pay great. It's I hear people that's like, oh, they pay the same as a prophy. They actually don't. They pay a lot higher than a prophy. And you can utilize that because you're doing the services of not just a prophy. Don't let your hygienist do things that is, the bloody prophy. You're not giving any type of help to your patient by not educating them during the services. Yeah. So definitely there's a lot of codes that can be used, making sure you use the D0180 as opposed to the D0150 code when doing a comprehensive exam. It's a perio evaluation. It takes more time to diagnose perio. You are, obviously educating the patient. So submit the right code and you can get better reimbursements for that.
Awesome. Awesome. So we'll have that resource. Allison, any other codes that you found that maybe, whether it be any codes that you just found besides those?
Well, I love that Amy just mentioned the comp perio exam because 100%, I mean, we add the narrative, and more time was needed for doctor to explain, periodontal disease. We get reimbursed every time. I mean, no issues, higher reimbursement with every fee schedule, at least for us right now. This one is kind of hit or miss and it's minimal, but the, local anesthetic used with, during a prophy. So the patient does have to report sensitivity during the cleaning. We do list out our hygienists, what is used, how much. Not all companies will pay for it, but some do. And then of course the prophy with the 4342. This one also is kind of hit or miss. We did break it down into our top plans, our top group plans. We called, if this is not allowed, we have that notated at the top of the plans, but there are some plans that allow that. So we actually bill out a prophy and a 4342. So, we just try to bill out for what we are doing, make sure, the hygienist providers are documenting that in the chart notes, x-rays, perio charts, but that would probably be what we're doing in our offices.
Yeah. And also definitely even just what insurances pay for 4 bite wings, 2 PAs, and a pano compared to an FMX. Just that alone will help you, create some great revenue within your practice because now you're just not looking at insurances. Like I always advise my offices, don't look at insurances as insurance. Look at them as Cigna, Aetna, Delta. What does Delta do that Aetna doesn't? And what does Cigna do that, so Cigna allows 4 quads on the same day, maximize that benefit. You want to make sure that you're treating Delta is one of my least favorite, but they obviously there's a huge game in the dental world, and so you have to learn their game. And they allow 2 prescription toothpaste to be paid per year. So if you didn't know that, it's a great one. Amazon, like anytime I see Amazon, I'm like, oh yeah, I love their insurance. There's no, frequency or age limitations for fluoride. You can get 2 prescription toothpaste paid a year as long as you submit the proper narrative. So if you're selling Prevident toothpaste in your office, this is a perfect way to now get patients to do what you want them to do with home care, and you're able to maximize their benefits. So really just, irrigation is another one. And insurances don't like to pay for it. United Healthcare will. So if you're already doing irrigation and you're like, oh, I always treat it as a do not bill to insurance, insurances pay for it. Delta, don't do it. Don't play with them when it comes to that, but United Healthcare will. So you just want to just really understand, look at insurances as, hey, Cigna, I can do a rest in the same day. Delta, I could never, so start treating them as different. And if you label and correctly know your schedule, that insurance coordinator can easily identify, or your hygienist should do a special training with just hygiene and say, hey, this is what the game is of these specific insurances, and this is what I'm able to do. So then that hygienist doesn't have to ask every single time. They can maybe even have their own cheat sheet of what they're able to do. And, like MetLife is a great one around that September time. A lot of offices do CBCT scans, but they do them for free because no insurances don't pay for it. Hey, I like to tell offices in September time, they haven't necessarily used their benefits. You haven't billed out anything and you don't necessarily need any treatment. You do a CBCT scan anyways. Take one, MetLife will pay for it. So why not use it? You're taking it in your office. You just choose not to charge the patient. These are good ways to kind of generate some revenue within your practice.
Awesome. I was sitting here thinking in my head, really what it's all coming down to is like, you have to understand the numbers of your practice. You have to know the vision of what you want. What kind of practice do you want? And then if you're going to play the insurance game, we may have to level up how we play. And I think that so much of it is just leveling up the game. It's like a chess game. And of course, they're not going to pay for anything we don't bill out for. And of course, they're not going to just extend that to us. So I think it's, ensuring that your insurance coordinator really understands, and I couldn't agree more, what like each plan is different, that each plan, that, like you said, Delta Dental is going to pay like this, MetLife is going to pay more like this. Knowing when you can have the 42 or 4342 with the pro fee is really important, because that's going to plan out, in that morning huddle, if that hygienist is going to be trying to add that 1 to 3 teeth. So I think getting a little bit more maybe intentional about how we play the game might help if you're not ready quite yet to drop any of the insurances. Amy, I know you have to take off, right?
Actually, I thought I moved my schedule around, so I have time now.
Okay, perfect. Because
Yes.
I was going to try to figure out how to segue that real easily there.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm definitely good.
Awesome. So we talked about when you think you need it, when to potentially drop PPOs, how to get the numbers, the queries to pull, how to, think about raising our fees, making sure that we utilize, Henry Shaw and Benco, some of those to be able to see where our fees are at. And then we discussed a little bit more about utilizing codes well and when to renegotiate fees. So now what I want to discuss is, for some offices, folding them under an umbrella, which Amy, I'll let you kind of start in on that, is really helpful. And sometimes it really is smart to truly go out of network based on the how that insurance works with out of network benefits. So Amy, I'll let you start with the umbrella policies when it starts to, you think about rolling them under Carrington or what have you. Tell me what you suggest and how to go about that.
Yeah, so out of network, while going through the process of negotiating, you will need to be out of network for a period of any time of time anyway. So a lot of times, like, doctors will get this like, oh wow, they pay amazing out of network, so they almost kind of get a feel of it, and then they can make the decision. You just have to kind of coach and navigate the office of what you want them to do. But helping with the verbiage to help their team understand this, and the verbiage they can use for their patients during this time is really, really important. So like, as they're deciding on which ones they're going to go out of network, it's like, if we need to drop an existing agreement for a doctor to join back under a higher agreement. And I always like to use MetLife as an example. You have to terminate your agreements with MetLife directly, but not until we have our agreements in place with the other umbrella company first. So you need to do things on the back end to make sure you're ready and available to do these next steps. Because a lot of times offices will make the mistake of getting out of network, and then they think, oh, I'm out of network, but then they're under this lower fee schedule that's just creeping under, and then they're stuck getting even lower fees than they did in the first place. So MetLife will take up to 12 months, which I know sounds so crazy, but they'll, most companies that you work with, or your front office, whoever you decide to do it, should be calling about every 3 weeks to see, what the follow-up is and how, when they'll be adding them back into their network. And there's no way to bypass this, unfortunately. When you are wanting to get out of network with insurances, there is a time of just, you have to tell your patients, or you have to have the correct verbiage. You have to really educate your patients and communicate with them. And of course, there's different ways that we're going to jump into that as well. But really, understanding this out of network time frame of how your patients are going to navigate through that, how your team is going to understand the verbiage so they can use that to their patients during this time as well, is extremely important. The communication skills have to be superb. And there are some insurance policies that rarely patients will even notice the difference when they are out of network, because they have many policies that are like intermediate policies, where they give the patients the same or similar fees to UCR, which is very good for the provider. So as well as, because of higher fees. So this happens like with MetLife and Aetna, they pay great out of network, so then the office doesn't really feel it. The patient's not really feeling it. The only time they feel it is that obviously if they're maxing out their benefits a little bit faster, they're going to feel it. But for the most part, there are some times where you could just kind of swim through there. Your patients are not really feeling it on those 6-month free cares, and there's not a lot of explanation that needs to be done.
Yep, for sure. And Allison, obviously you just went through this not too long as we were looking, through our plans and kind of really have reduced quite a bit. When offices contact you sometimes too, just to say, how did you go about it? Because what you said is we really prepared on the front end. Much like Amy, like you were saying, we did a lot of homework on the front end to ensure that it was going to be a seamless transition. So can you kind of go through what that looks like, Allison? The prep work to go to?
Well, so again, every office is different. In our situation, we were contracted with Carrington's higher network. So we contract with the Carrington Care Platinum PPO network. It's probably 15 to 18% below our office fees. So it was our highest fee schedule of any of the companies. So we had that going for us. That was in place. All of our providers were contracted, both offices. And when I say we prepped and we really did the work on the front end, we did. But, we learned. We didn't start that way. So Aetna, was one of the first contracts, and we actually were contracted with DHA. So we were not even contracted with Aetna. But Aetna was going through DHA. We terminated that contract. We were learning. It was our first, experience. The letters went out, which I think we'll talk about, all this alarm and craziness. And kind of as Amy mentioned, it was just this beautiful, seamless, like Aetna, they either went right out of network paying up to pretty much our full office fees. And then they did start moving over to Carrington, which was still much higher than DHA was. We learned so much from that experience because, again, we did create some alarm that we probably didn't need to. But using that really as our guidance for, moving throughout last year, for us, the contracts we terminated, we were able to, use Carrington's, their insurance listing. So we knew, when we termed with Guardian, these plans would fall under Carrington. We knew when we termed with MetLife, any of their PDP plus plans would fall under Carrington. So, we did expect about the 90-day transition. Some of them were quick. Guardian was within the first 30 days. They started picking up the Carrington contract. So it really just depends. MetLife probably did take about the full 90, but this is the other thing just for an office, because a lot of that.
What year were you doing it?
2022.
Okay.
Yeah. I think offices do need to have a plan, and it needs to be really set in stone for that transition period. Whether you are going to do adjustments, whether you are going to honor in-network processing for those patients, but have a really concrete plan, because the plans will process out of network during this transition. Some providers will be picked up quicker than others. One of our newer providers, she took the longest for Guardian to pick up her Carrington contract. But some offices that I've talked to, they did not do any adjustments. They communicated very far in advance that this was happening. They billed the patient exactly what those EOBs reflected. We decided to make adjustments, which a lot of offices do. We looked at it as, these plans should move to Carrington. They should be in network. We are going to honor in network during that transition phase. So I think just having that plan in place too, so that once you do start getting those EOBs and they're kind of processing different than they have, that it's not this pandemonium, and that you have a plan for that, and you can communicate that to the patients as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great point. Honestly, the whole, how do you handle your fees when you are out of network, and how that's going to relate to the patient, because are they going to feel the kick and the burn with you, or treating it as an office and know that, hey, this is a transition we're going through and it's not going to affect you in any way.
Yep. And that's what we decided.
Yep, exactly. And I typically advise that, to be honest, too. And PDP Plus, is a perfect example where, you'll get 120% increase through an umbrella company compared to directly negotiating to MetLife, so MetLife, they're going to want you to do a crown for $680. and they're like, well, we'll negotiate to 684, and you're like, that
Yeah.
doesn't give me anything. But
Yeah.
getting it into an umbrella through another umbrella or
Mhm.
accessing another fee schedule, you'll see a huge 120% increase like
Yeah.
overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and my last thing that we learned as well is, when these contracts are termed, so if, I'll just use Guardian. So, we terminated directly with Guardian. We knew that those plans would move to Carrington. So, but again, it can take up to 90 days. So during that time, though, I would advise billing out your office fees or UCR. Don't attach that Carrington fee schedule, because during that, interim time, these plans are going to pay out a network, UCR. So you want to bill out those highest fees. And if you're doing the adjustments, you're still going to do that, but you might as well get that higher reimbursement during those 90 days. We learned that one the hard way too. So,
which we're gonna talk about some of the really fun things that we've learned. But because I'm like, people might as well learn from us, huh, Allison?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when it comes to training the team, I think the first thing is doing the prep work on the forefront with your insurance team is going to make it to where you train the team the best.
Mhm.
Because what I say is, like, if you kind of just are super ambiguous with it, your team's going to be ambiguous and unprepared. So the more you're prepared on the front end with, this is how it's going to look and this is the verbiage we want to use, the better. Because you want everybody in the office, including your dental assistants, your hygienists, everybody, your front office, all speaking the same language. Because what we found in the office was the patients were sitting with the dental assistant saying, what do you know about this whole moving under, out of network? Or they'll ask them things like that. And if your assistants don't know anything and have to say, I don't know, let me go get so-and-so, it's not a hard answer. It's just a practiced answer. And I think, that's really the big thing is, we found out that, with a lot of these, the transition was pretty darn seamless, and the patients weren't going to necessarily feel anything at all. But we had to find that all out on the front end so that when we had a true meeting about it, Allison took that time in the meeting to say, here's what we're going to say to all the patients. And it wasn't that we're going out of network. We never said that. We really just said how we're working with your insurance has changed. This is what it's going to look like. Because if you say the minute, like what we decided was, no matter what you say after, all they heard is out of network, I probably should go start looking at somebody in network. Instead, they don't even hear anything after it, is what we figured out. So if instead it's just how we work with your insurance, it's just changed. We're still insurance friendly, but this is how it's going to look to work with your plan. And so Allison kind of practiced with, that's as easy as it needs to be, with a lot of the different team members. I agree, Amy, hygienists got maybe a little more specific with things that were, involved with them, PAs, things like that they may take that, potentially have a different copay. But by and large, we train the whole team how to have that simplicity of language. Allison, am I, when it comes to training up the team, can you think of things that maybe we did well and things that I know we did not do awesome?
Well, as I mentioned, Aetna, we emailed out the letter, we mailed the letter, we used words like terminating contracts,
and it was long. It was a long letter, you guys. Like, I mean, like we spell checked that thing. I mean, Allison and I had the most beautiful paragraphs, paragraphs, the whole letter. And that's what we emailed out thinking we were top notch.
Yeah.
Let me
and then I got to take all those hundreds of calls of all the frantic, so we learned, so much. And again, as Amy mentioned, and as we kind of already talked about, those plans really seamlessly, transitioned right to paying full office fees. We learned that, man, if we wouldn't have sent this letter and caused all this chaos, these patients wouldn't have even known. Yes, maybe on a crown, maybe on an implant, they would have noticed a higher, coinsurance, or if truly they're studying their treatment plans from the past and they've had a, crown. But it's like we just created so much chaos. And so, the route that we decided to go with the companies that we knew would fall under Carrington after the transition, we opted to not send the letter in any form. We did opt, and we cannot take credit for this because I did have another office help, but we created this awesome little, flyer that we had everywhere in our offices. One side is a letter format that just explains the changes. We had, updated our verbiage at this point to say things like, we are changing how we are working with your insurance company. We are still an insurance friendly office. We made sure to say that, the insurance just kind of services and expectations that they had of us in the past, those would all stay the same, meaning we are still going to verify their benefits. We're still going to do everything we can to maximize their benefits. We're just working with their company differently. We also kind of came up with these. So the other side is the frequently asked questions, because, our patients, just like any office, what they want to know is, can I still come to your office? Is it going to cost me more? I mean, really, that's what they want to know. And so we tried to just break it down in a letter and a frequently asked question, format. They were easily accessible. And then we did choose to spread out our, changes with the contract. So we did not do, Guardian, MetLife, Aetna, Cigna all at once. We did not. I know some offices do that. They kind of start and then they're like, if we're doing this, we're just going to do all of it. But for us, we spread it out. We had a plan. And so the office, the treatment coordinators, they would start having those conversations when going over treatment plans. And honestly, it worked very, very well. There was not the chaos. There was not the panic. And it just went incredibly smoothly compared to, how it started.
The giant letters that we're so proud of.
I agree. I think a great terminology or verbiage using is a contract rearrangement. So you're basically not using the word termination. You're not using the word. So basically you're using words of like, we're just rearranging our contracts right now with your insurance. And so it's just a way for them to understand. And it's more simple terminology that will help them realize that, the termination word, because that's kind of in any way we try to use that in normal life is never good. So rearranging though is definitely a great term that people can understand. It sounds less, scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. We did get to that point where it was like, do not say terminate. Do not.
Yeah. And don't, I mean, my advice would be, I'm not saying don't send out letters, but I tell people like, if you feel really like you've got to do that, well, do all the prep work, pull all the numbers, make sure you know what you're doing. Bullet point it, simplicity, just the facts, and still try to use verbiage that's more like what Amy and Allison said, if you feel like you have to do that.
And that MetLife are the ones that typically will be the ones that send letters out to your patients. So you can, and honestly, nowadays, people really don't, depending, of course, on your demographics of your patient base, but a lot of people don't even read what is being sent. So you're spending all this time creating documents and doing all of this, and then you realize your patients don't even open the mail. So you're creating this idea of a trouble that's not really even existing yet. So picking up the phone, calling your patients, I think would be a lot more beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and one thing, and I'm sure officers know this, we did set up kind of a separate billing, email billing, phone number, in the triage, so that when there were questions, it didn't barrage the front office. Yep. So if you're looking to do this, I'm just to kind of wrap everything up. One, know your numbers, pull your reports, really know where your payer mix is coming from. Assess if you need to raise fees, if you need to renegotiate fees potentially, utilize some of the coding secrets, make sure that you know how to code appropriately, because regardless, you just need to know that. Once you know the payer mix, you know the numbers, you know which ones you want to potentially reduce, then really prepare for it so that you understand what the transition is going to look like, how long, and what it's going to mean for the patients. Train the team up on this is the verbiage we want to say. I always recommend if you can actually have it like bullet pointed or super streamlined, laminated, and attached to all of their screens. That's actually what I'd prefer, because in a pinch, if they haven't practiced it enough and a patient says it in their chair, they literally can say it verbatim practically right off the screen. Set up potentially a phone number, a separate billing phone number and an email. billing email, so that if there are inquiries, they can go to that person and be answered within 48 hours or whatever. That can help to keep some of it away from the front office, especially when it's busy. But yeah, I mean, I think that I think highlights it. Anything, ladies, that I failed in my little recap to kind of make sure to let people know?
No, I think honestly, it's just really, if you are deciding to do it as a company or as an office, and you're keeping that in-house, of really just making sure you understand those things up front before you get to the point of involving your patients, because you want to be prepared for those things. It's, you know, you want to confidently be able to do it and know that you're leading your patients in the right way. Because if you don't know your contracts and you're just saying, I hate MetLife, and you don't even know what fee schedule they're going under, you don't know where, you know, you're using, you're going to still hate MetLife even more probably, because I'll use an example of like MetLife, Carrington, and Dynamax. If you have all of those three, you know, you're with MetLife, but it's Carrington and Dynamax fee schedules, and you think you're going to drop MetLife, it's not going to go to Carrington. It's going to go to your lowest fee schedule. It's going to go to Dentamax. And so you've taken all this time to do things, but you're still not getting the results you want. It's because you still have to play their game, know which ones to drop, and how they're going to work with each other during that time as well. And so really just making sure that if it's something you're not confident with, and maybe your staff isn't as knowledgeable, you know, using a company that will strategize those things for you, I think is going to be extremely helpful.
Awesome. And that's what your company does, Amy?
So I work with PPO Profits. I don't do any fee negotiation, which is so funny because I know I talked about this twice, and I actually don't do anything with fee negotiations. I do all insurance billing. So I work with over 40 plus offices doing insurance billing, sending out claims, appeals, know what codes to use, coaching and training. And yes, but PPO Profits does that. That's what they're known for. And then he has different departments, and I do insurance billing.
Perfect. Well, Amy, if you wouldn't mind adding that resource for the codes that we kind of discussed. Ashley, thank you as always for hanging with us during, I'm sure what was, you know, the discussion. You felt probably so like, do I add here?
Oh yeah, I'm here to just, you know, guide and help in any way I can. Push the buttons and make sure we're recording. You know, I'm here for you. Yes, thank you, Summer.
Yes. Well, thank you, ladies. I very much appreciate your time. I appreciate what you guys do for jobs, because I really think like the passion you have with insurance actually is super helpful to offices and to the entire organization that we work in. So thank you, ladies. I appreciate your time so much.
I have to add on to that too, insurance and getting information of the different areas is just something our DSN members are always looking for. So thank you for your time and sharing that with them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's awesome when I see offices reach out and ask questions. It's because they want to improve what they have. So please, I always encourage everyone out there in the community. This is what we're here for. We'd love to help. We'd love to help making sure that you are maximizing the most you can for your office. And it's just great that there's so many resources like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, ladies. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.